Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of The Midnight Shorette, a design variety show by two architects, myself, David Lee, and Marina Borderonay. Borderonay. Get it right, people. It's not that difficult. It's pretty difficult. Très difficile.
Oh, even
Muy
French
difficile.
people struggle.
Really? It's not common?
Well,
King
obviously,
Borderonay.
no.
Queen Borderonay.
Oh,
Louis Borderonay. This week it's just the two of us, and what we're going to do is answer some questions that we've received over the last period of time. So this would be considered a design companion episode, right?
Yeah, let's be companions.
Forward to the sponsors! First up, we have AutoCAD by Graphisoft. Look, here's the thing. I was doing some work today, some architecture work. Architecture work 24/7, all the time. And I was using SketchUp. And I was like, you know what? This is kind of like a bitch. This is like a bitch program. Bitch-ass weak program. Weak program. Then I'm using AutoCAD. I'm like, I don't like AutoCAD either. And it's ridiculous. I'm going to go back and forth between the two. And it's so difficult to go back and forth between the two. I don't even bother. I would measure the drawing in AutoCAD or make a sketch of it and then just recreate it in SketchUp because I don't trust AutoCAD. You import it, lines are all over the place. I don't trust it. I'd rather just recreate it.
That's so inefficient workflow. I just sketch everything on paper and then I modeled it.
So that's why you should use AutoCAD. Everyone should use AutoCAD in their workflow.
Or
because
maybe just choose a draftsperson.
Yeah. Or just send it out to some person in China, unless you're employing a Chinese person. AutoCAD is a BIM program that allows you to do 2D and 3D work at the same time. It is quicker than Revit, I would say, from my experience. And it's good for large and small offices, and it's very user-friendly, much more so than Revit. So, than Revit. So if, you're a small office and you're kind of hesitant to get into the BIM world of things because you've heard it's quite a difficult transition, then AutoCAD is a great solution for you. So go to graphisoft.com and check out their program, and you can try it out.
And if you're an architect looking for a new job and you're not really sure where to look to find firms that are hiring, well, we got you covered. Go to archinect.com, head to their job board, which is updated daily. It doesn't really matter where you are. It doesn't really matter where you are around the world. Archinect has firms, in Paris, in New York, in Shanghai, posting jobs. It's updated.
Beirut. Probably. There's some in Beirut.
Right. You can also follow them on Instagram. They advertise some of their latest posts for the job board on there. They also have a pretty active forum where you can ask questions if you feel like you need help from your fellow architects. And that's it. Good luck. And check out our episode about portfolio, resume, and how to apply for jobs while you're at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're looking for any advice in the about the design and architecture professions, then you should listen back to our tips and tactics episodes and previous design companion shows like this one where we answer questions. We also have a hotline. It is 213-222-6950. So if you have any questions, you can text or call that number, and then we will answer your questions on the show.
Like we're going to do today.
Lastly, we have NAD, NAADME.com is their website. They are an online retailer of a variety of goods, a little bit of clothing, some soap, always a lot of soap, maybe some, I don't think they have food, some dishware, some mugs, some purses, some jewelry. And it is a designer goods retailer. But what's unique about their stuff is their products are mainly designed and created by people from North Africa and the Middle East, specifically the newer and younger generation, although they do feature artists from around the world. Their things are reasonably priced for the most part, and they're quite unique, and they're very tasteful. And they were founded by an architect and her husband. So check out NAADME.com and use the code MIDNIGHT to get 15% off your order. Right?
Yes. All right. This is Design Companion by the Midnight Shorette.
We have not seen these questions before, so this is a very transparent, conversation, and our responses will be honest.
Right. So, which one do you want to start with?
No, hit me with whatever it is, and I'll answer it.
All right. This one, I'm just going to read it. Hey guys, I just finished hearing episode 142. It was related to me in a way. And
Wait. What was 142 about?
Oh, about IPAL.
IPAL. What is IPAL?
IPAL.
What's IPAL?
It's basically some kind of stupid program that NCARB put in place to get you licensed while you're still stuck in school. So if you want to know more, just listen to 142. We've got a lot to ramble about.
But basically, our opinion is pretty well communicated just within that one sentence, amazingly.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't agree with it, don't bother.
Okay.
So I was meaning to get in touch with you guys regarding my situation. I am 30 years old. And in my second semester of my second year of architecture school, it's a 4-2 program. I transfer from county college.
Yeah, I think you mean city, but county, maybe it's county. Yeah.
So a lot of classes transferred, but still had to start from Studio 1. I get along very well with my fellow classmates, but my biggest concern or worry is landing a job after graduating. I always worry if my age and experience will be an obstacle. I would love to hear your thoughts or any recommendation you guys may have. I've only worked at one architecture firm so far and I do have my own painting and home improvement business with my brother and father. Thanks a lot, you guys. I really enjoy hearing you. Thanks for what you do. Well, thank you for listening to episode 142. First thing. Well, I mean, that's a pretty good question, and I feel like probably a lot of our companions are in that kind of situation. I feel like in any career, when you start a little late in the field, you feel like you kind of start with a handicap in a way, right? Or that could be a difficulty to get you a job.
Well, it's kind of weird in a way. I mean, so starting off a little more philosophical, like why does one feel like they are behind just because they happen to be
society
5 years older? And this is the thing, right? So like there's some, I mean, biologically speaking, there's not really much difference as long as you keep your brain fluid. It only starts to kind of like congeal in a way if you let it to. And also after you get past a certain point in life, and near your 30s is not a concern. I suppose I don't know if this person's a female or not. I can't recall. I don't think they are. But if you're a female, that's more of an issue if you want to have kids, right? You have to think about this stuff sooner.
Yeah, or you just make it work.
Okay, just go steal a baby. So, I mean, I think one question you kind of ask yourself, which is, like I said, a little more conceptual, but it's like, why do you feel like you're going to be behind? And the age gap we're talking about in this case is not super small, but it's also not really big. It's only 5 years or so, 25 to 30, right, is probably the gap. And I feel like, it depends on where you're living too. And I feel like in more metropolitan areas, it tends to keep people younger or feeling younger. So like in New York City, it's kind of weird because when you live there, people who are in the 50s behave like they're 30, and they have the kind of the vitality and that aura about them that says, I'm still 25 or 30 years old, both in terms of how they behave, and how they act, and how often they go out, how they socialize, and also in the careers. Like everyone's moving around a lot, and it's just when you're in a setting like that, like suddenly 30 feels like you're 20 and 45 is 30. So I think it's all relative to a certain degree. And so that's like the first thing I would say is I don't know if it really matters thinking about the bigger picture in that sense,
Yeah, and I actually think that could be a huge advantage, because that means that people who graduate same time as you are like much younger than you. And sometimes, being young or the age at which you should be graduating according to society isn't really helpful. It's
Can you say that last part again?
If you're graduating at the age society is telling you you're supposed to be graduating at, it might not be helpful to start a job. Because your competition is the same as you, right? You're part of the standard. And you don't have any other baggage that differentiates yourself from others.
Well, baggage is typically a negative thing, but I get what you're saying.
Well, I mean, background, like experience or whatever. This person's 30. That means that he or she probably did stuff before starting school, which is already a way to differentiate yourself from other graduates when you're going to be looking for a job.
I mean, that's an interesting point, actually.
And also because you're older, people are assuming you're more mature.
Right.
So there's things that they won't have to worry about you doing or not doing. It's kind of a given.
I think that's true. I mean, I think it's a fascinating point that there's so many people now that graduate with the same degree, same background. They're honor students. They did well on their SATs, and they have a college degree, and they're all 25. And we were talking to a friend actually, and it was like, he's like 31 or something, and he was saying that, he doesn't feel like an adult. Which I suppose a lot of people don't feel like they're adults, but he doesn't feel like an adult. And he was commenting that, it feels like it's much more common now for adulthood, in quotes, to basically be postponed. Mm-hmm. And in part, I would assume it's because everyone's so
going to school,
educated, highly educated, overeducated, whatever. They have all this extra higher education, and it postpones adulthood. So, like, some people, some friends, and one of them did a 4-year degree in whatever program. It was in architecture, and then went straight into work. Pretty common. And then one of their siblings went off to do medicine. So they did 4 years of college, and then like something else, like another 4 years, another 2 years. I mean, to become a doctor is like a 12-year road. And the difference.
Good luck with that.
And the difference
start doing you're like 40 otherwise.
And the difference between those two people, let's say 5 or 6 years after undergraduate school, is amazing. One has to do with who they are naturally, but the individual who did not go back to school and worked for 5 years doing sales and doing various things, their social skills and their level of apparent maturity is astronomically higher than the person who stayed in school and to become a doctor for the past 6 years or past undergraduate school. And so it's all to say that I think maybe the former expectation, but that by the time you hit 30, you're supposed to be well on your way to being more settled down, and you're supposed to have things figured out and have your career and have all this experience by this time. I'm not saying it's a bad goal, but I think it's a bit different now than it once was, for sure. And everyone's still floundering, I would say, well into their mid-30s, I feel like. Everyone's redefining their careers and moving around.
Yeah, I don't think it's that rare anymore. Mm-hmm. I think it happens way more than, maybe a few decades ago. And so I don't think, you should think about this as being an issue for you when you're going to be graduating. I think actually you should play it in your favor, if anything else. And also this person is saying that he or she already has their own painting and home improvement business with some family members.
Right. Which,
even if you only have worked in one architecture office as of now, but you have that experience on the side, that's an invaluable experience to have.
Yeah. And I think you said something also that was really good, which is, when this person graduates along with his colleagues, he's going to be older, but his level of maturity, right, is potentially an advantage. And whether or not he's mature, we don't know, but he's going to look more mature, presumably. Maybe he'll have a beard or something.
Or if it's a guy, I don't know.
Yeah, well, if it's a girl and they have a beard, then that's also very unique and very hireable these days. But I think it's a valid point. We had a similar question from a caller, or from a Facebook group, and this was a while ago. The female that was a mother.
Oh yeah.
And a similar concern of I'm going to be entering this profession older. Is this a problem? Well, I think to get hired, you always stick to your strengths, and you highlight your strengths as a way to become more desirable. And that's different for different people. And in the case of a person who's older, it is the maturity. It's the fact that you're going to be organized. You're not going to show up late. Because one of the issues is when you hire someone fresh out of school, you kind of wonder how much babysitting you have to do.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with design skill set or anything architecture related. It just has to do with being a professional and being a responsible human being. And, that is a legitimate concern for a lot of employers. And so if you can, check that box off on their list of things, then that's potentially really great.
So this program is a 4-year program?
Yes, a 4+2, so he's going to have to do a master's afterwards. And I assume So he's a second year in undergraduate school. So by the time he finishes everything up, he'll be quite older.
But he doesn't have to do a master.
He has to if he wants to become licensed.
Okay, so he doesn't have to do a master.
Okay, well, I'm assuming that he wants to become licensed.
Well, I don't know. I'm not assuming anything.
Okay. So, what was I going to say? You were saying something. What were you saying?
Experience, the fact that he has a painting and home improvement business on the side.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge experience because you're like directly involved with it since it's your family members you're doing it with, and it's directly related to construction, therefore architecture. So, you could definitely set that experience on a resume and an application as something that's very different from like any other students who probably did like, some CAD SketchUp internship at a typical architecture office.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think also another way to look at the whole hiring process is that if somehow I think we've talked about this before, if somehow you knew that you were competing for this position and you were up against this one other person, and this other individual is your in competition as he's described it, meaning they're like 25 years old, they just came out of school, and they're very different from you in that regard, and then they end up hiring the younger person. And if you somehow knew they went with them because they wanted someone younger and they thought that the younger person is going to have more of an open mind and maybe a different perspective of things or whatever, then again, it's almost like, that was a non-starter, so don't be concerned about it in a way. And I don't really know, it's kind of a weird kind of like mental game you play with yourself, at least I do. But you don't ever know what the situation is and why the employer chose one individual over another. But that's kind of how I view it, right? So in some ways, it's like if you don't get a position and you lose it because you're too old next to this 25-year-old, then that position wasn't meant for you anyway, and it's just not meant to be. Are
they actually required to put your date of birth on your resume?
Mm-mm.
So, as long as you look young and fresh, doesn't matter really what the number is.
The other thing too is I feel like by the time he graduates, he's going to be, he's already 30.
That's 2 more years, so 32.
Yeah, so he'll be 32. So we're talking about like a 7-year gap, actually, not really 5, 7 or even 8-year gap, which is fairly significant.
Yeah, but again, we don't know what the previous experience is, so it's not like doing anything. But it's funny to me that a lot of people worry about being older than the norm, but like just a few years older. Like I feel like there's no reason to be worried about it.
Well, I don't know if people have a certain idea about this profession that makes a bigger difference than in other professions.
I don't know, but like I would be more worried if that person was like 55 and it's like, I want to change career, I'm going back to school. That's a bigger deal, right? Like obviously, like what have you done before? What are you going to try to do? What's your goal? In the same time, it's inspiring when you see people who are in their 40s and 50s and like change career completely. It's possible. If these people can do it, then, your 30, 32-year-old person could definitely do it much easier than that. Yeah, no,
I think the gap that we're talking about is close enough to where they're still in the same ballpark. Maybe he's beginning to reach outer limits. If we're talking about a 10-year gap, then it starts maybe to encroach on the ballpark range. But I think between 25 and 35, again, depending on where you are and how you look and how you behave, like it's all still relatively close. So you kind of, it's kind of weird when you apply for jobs and you do interviews and you create resumes and stuff, you almost need to, and this applies for actually teaching positions as well, you almost need to have like a very strong identity that you craft. And that identity should be authentic. It shouldn't be this made up facade, but like there needs to be a story that's defined and understandable and memorable, and it needs to be a thing. Right? It can't be some like amorphic background that's very generic. You need to have something that makes you be memorable, or at the very least be like easily understood and defined as something. Does that kind of make sense? And so for this person, he kind of has like the flexibility, like he could probably come across as being younger than his actual age if he wanted to. I don't mean lying about your age, but just in the way you speak, with the way you present your work and whatever else. Or you could also, he's at that threshold. We could also play the age and experience up, experience meaning life experience, and play that up where he wants to. And so I would think about, specific moments in the application process and specific parts of the application process of when you want to kind of bend your apparent age one way or the other, because it could be, again, very beneficial to go one way or the other, depending on the topic at hand. If we're talking about creativity and freedom of thought and new perspectives, well, then generally trying to appear a little bit younger, again, the variables are numerous, could be better. But if we're talking about responsible human being again, like, showing up to work on time, asking good questions, being dedicated to the work, and not showing up drunk or hungover, then maybe being a little bit older would be good. So that's another way to think about it, is that, you're not fixated. He's not fixed at the age that he's actually at. And no one will actually know, because I don't think they're permitted to even ask, like, legally. I don't think you're supposed to ask how old you are.
I don't think so, right? So, in that case, who cares? Unless it says on your forehead, I'm 32, right. Like, no one would know.
I mean, the issues that I've had, and I've talked about this on the podcast, is I've always looked younger.
Oh, poor
so
you.
when I
God.
get to interviews, that my struggle has always been the opposite. Like, how do I try and appear a little bit older? Do I wear a fake mustache or what? Because I need them to take me a little more seriously than what they think. Even if your resume says you graduated in this year, you have X numbers years of experience and these projects and whatever, it's almost like all the interviews I've been at, it's almost like that's kind of secondary. Like, they know it's there, they've seen it, you've talked about it, they know it, and yet they're going to kind of treat you just based on how you look and how you speak.
Yeah, if you look like 12, that's kind of an issue.
No, it's true. And so people who are graduating when they're 25, but they have a beard and they're 6 feet tall.
But that's the thing. Like, for some reason, the age of like how old you look like gives you more or less credibility.
Yeah.
Which is annoying. Like, multiple times I'm like, what do I need to do to look like I'm older? Do I need to wear like red lipstick, put my hair in a certain way, like wear like some stupid clothes that my mom would wear? What's the deal? So it could go either way. It could go like you look too young, or you're too young, or like you're slightly too old, or you look like way too old. And
this comes down to also just how you behave, right? Your physical character, not physical characteristics, your mannerisms, right? And it's regardless of age. If you come across as being confident and being, a pleasure to work with and responsible and all those things, then it's more like, huh?
Oh yeah, you got to be a pleasure to work with.
Well, then it's more like people are going to come to you for answers, even if they know that you have less experience than the kid next to you. If the kid next to you has more experience, but they look like they're just always lost, or whatever else. So to me, I think he's at that point where you can kind of bend it one way or the other. But the other question he had was, his biggest concern is getting a job after graduating. Age was one issue. We kind of talked about that. And then the experience, the lack of experience, because he's only worked at one architecture firm. So
that's the thing, right? Your experience is not limited to architecture office experience, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you have that side business on your own. Well, that's an experience, and you got to put that on there, and you got to develop on it. Whatever you've done before architecture school, there's probably some experience that could be listed and could be packaged in a way that looks like it brings something to your profile. Yeah. And it could help you compensate for maybe the lack of architecture experience.
I think it could, and again, it's like if the employer they know that they want to hire someone with at least 2 years of architecture experience, then it's like that's just not for you. Then it wasn't meant. It's not going to work out no matter what you do, unless you go get those 2 years of experience. But it's that option's completely off the table, so don't even worry about it. Does that mean that there are less opportunities for you in terms of hiring? Probably, yes. Does it mean that there are going to be no opportunities? No. Does it mean that there's going to be enough for you to probably find something? Again, depending on location? Likely, yeah. Because your competition, again, is other people in the same boat as you. Anyone who has more experience and they get hired because of that, that's not your concern. That's outside of your vision. That's outside of the realm of possibility. So you're only really talking about the people who have the same amount of experience as you. And the life experience and maturity and all the stuff we talked about, those are potential advantages, right? If you massage it and communicate it correctly. But the biggest thing in terms of whether or not you're hireable right after you graduate and when you have like 0 to 1 to maybe 2 years of experience is portfolio. That's the biggest thing, I think, right? And so I just don't see the 1 year of experience as being a problem. I see more the issue that I would be concerned with is the portfolio. You know, like we didn't have well, there's the economic crash, but aside from that, you know, like us and a lot of our colleagues and friends, they didn't have any problems getting jobs with basically no years of experience because that's the pool you're in, and there's plenty of offices who are looking for people at that level. You know.
That's the thing. I mean, not every single student who graduates from architecture has worked in offices.
Yeah. I don't know what the percentage is, but
like some schools require internships, some others don't. Yeah. And, you know, if you've been like trying to focus as hard as possible on like your studio and your projects, then it's totally fine. It's totally valid. And talking about portfolio, again, I don't know the extent of that home improvement business on the side and painting, but there's probably stuff you can use and include in your portfolio as well than your resume. Yeah,
and I think what this person should do is look at the potential negatives of appearing too old. And now I'm not talking about experience, I'm talking about age. And then figure out ways to counteract that in the application materials and the interview. So one concern is that, and this is based on what I've seen going through school, obviously, and then teaching, is that there's a tendency for transfer students, and he's a transfer student. So students who did city college or county college and they transferred over to an undergraduate school, and they're a lot older, right? So this is actually he's older, but so typically, like if you're let's say 19-year-old in the second year, then you have like a 22 or 23-year-old that's a transfer student. So it's 4-year difference. The older students, the transfer students, tend to be much less creative. They're much more closed-minded, and they aren't able to think freely. Right? They lack the creative juice. They lack that energy, and they're just. It's because and a lot of times they've already practiced and done whatever architecture stuff, and so they think they know what architecture is. And of course, we've talked about how undergraduate school is really meant for you to be questioning what architecture is and kind of opening the gates to the matrix. And when transfer students come in, they've already defined it, right? And then they tend to have much more. Their work is always done sooner, and they're more organized because they're older, but their work is just so staid. It's like very typical, and they're locked into this idea, this preconception of what design and architecture is, and that preconception is based on what the real world is, but not what it should be. So would be my biggest concern if I was a teacher and I had a transfer student, or if I was an employer and I was going to hire someone of this age. It's like you might be more mature. And no,
because I think that's a concern that teachers might have. But in the real world, you deal with real stuff. Having that kind of more pragmatic approach of thinking might actually be something firms are looking for.
It's
depending on the firm, right?
Depending on the.
Like you're a dealer's video type of office, maybe that's not the type of people you're looking to hire. Right. If you're more like a mom and pop architecture firm that does local stuff, that might be totally fine.
Well, let's assume that the office he wants to get hired at, and the office that we're talking about is like the best office in the world. So they do built work. They're super conceptual. They do writing. They teach. They are very practical still. They do the whole thing. They're the whole enchilada. And if that's the case, then again, I'm just saying that's one of the concerns is like, did you miss that opportunity when you were younger, from the age of like 18 to 23, when you're tend to be much more free and your brain's more squishy? Did you miss that opportunity to really start questioning things and have good, strong design background because you came in too late, right? And that's an assumption. Not everyone's that way. It doesn't always work that way. But I'm telling you, from what I've seen, like 95% of the time, that's the way it is for older students.
Yeah, but I think it might be, also a personality thing. Like I feel like people who think freely and kind of like, not following the rules or the templates of things, it's within them. It's not necessarily something that they learn.
Maybe.
Maybe.
No, that's part of it, yeah.
And, I don't know what you can do about it. Like, are you going to change the project in your portfolio? You're going to change the way you think about projects?
Well, so this is why I bring it up, is that he's in his second year, so he still has another semester and 2.5 years-ish, right? And then another 2 years for master's. So, and if he wants to go the more practical route and not be interested in bigger questions, that's totally fine. You do that. That's one way of doing it. But assuming, again, you want to like have everything, then again, I would say like this is one of the concerns I would have on the face without knowing this person, doing the work or anything, but this is what I've seen. So if you can push the boundaries and try to be more creative, more open, again, to answer the concerns that I would have looking at an older candidate who only has 4 years of undergraduate degree under his belt, then I think that's a good move. And I think it's a good move for hiring, but also just your own personal development as a designer, as an architect. It's just like people that are in the world for too long, they just can't see past what they've already seen. They can't get past it. Everything becomes like a collage of all the shit they've seen in the real world because they've been around older than the 19-year-old, and
but what I'm saying is I don't know that you can actually change people like that.
Force them to change. No, how the change happens and what causes the metamorphosis or whatever, I don't know, but I'm just saying that it's something to be aware of.
All right, doctor.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, okay, let's see here. So, still had to start from Studio One, and honestly, that might be a good thing. I know that it's not ideal in terms of time and money, but having to start from Studio One might be a good thing too, in part because of the issues I just mentioned.
The other thing is that he says that he gets along really well with his fellow classmates who are probably like the age you should be at when you start school or whatever that means.
They're younger.
Yeah, so then it's good if you can get along with them, because that means that you can get along with them if you have to work with younger people in an office setting. Mm-hmm. But also you can probably look at the way they think about projects, or maybe think about how they're going to get a job, and kind of compare that to the way you're thinking about doing it. And there is definitely things to learn from that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it for that one, right?
Yeah.
If there's anything that's been individual, when you hear this, if you have any additional questions or something that we missed, then just feel free to reach out again, and we'll try to respond sooner than later. But I think it's pretty extensive. Okay.
All right. Message number 2 says, "Hi guys, I am just finishing my master in architecture, but mm-hmm. I am 28 years old with 0 work experience, really nothing. Do you think it's still alright to pursuing an architecture career? If you could answer me, I would like to have the most honest reply that you can give me." Well, I feel like a lot of the things we just said are probably applicable.
Well, 28. So
28, it's not that bad. It's almost like I want to say like, well, I don't really know what the concern is, because that's a very common situation. Like there's a lot of people who finish their masters in architecture at around that age and don't have a lot of experience. And there's thousands and tens of thousands. I don't know if there's millions in the United States, but tens of thousands of people in the same situation floating around trying to find jobs. So it's a similar thing of like, well, look at what your competition is. It's the people that have your experience. You can't go back and change the past. It is what it is, right?
And if you can be better than those people, then great. If you want to be better than people who have more experience than you, then you have to go get that first. But we don't know. The big question I have to this person is we don't know if their bachelor's was in architecture or a different degree, because that makes a big difference.
Well, yeah, because that aside, let's say it's in architecture, right? You're doing your master. People often do undergrad, they work for a few years, and then they decide to do a master, and they go back to school. And then maybe they graduate, they're 28 years old. And
are you saying that their bachelor's is in architecture?
I'm saying if it is,
okay,
then it's completely common, and it's not a problem, right?
Well,
if that's your only architecture experience and you've done something else before, it's not like, I feel like people worry about numbers when really it's more about what have you done
and skill sets
since you've been alive on Earth for 28 years old. Yeah. Have you just been like flaking around being a couch potato for 28 years and today you woke up and you want to be an architect?
Right.
Or have you been like studying and like traveling and working on like other things until today? So to me that would be the biggest worry. It's like, what do I have to tell people about what I'm good at or what I've been doing?
So if this person is a 4+2, right, and they did undergraduate school, right out of high school, so it's 22.
You always do that.
And then let's say they went right into graduate school, they would graduate when they're 26. So this person's 2 years older. Again, 26 to 28, no difference. Let's say they didn't do their undergraduate degree in architecture at all, and then now they're doing architecture. You end up 1 or 2 years off from someone. So in terms of the age, it's not a concern, I don't think. The work experience, again, there's just so many people who go to school for an architecture and other profession, 5+2, 4+2, 4+3.
You have your whole life to get work experience. It's not something you should worry about when you're still in school. Really,
you're just a couple years off in terms of work experience too. So you're nearly starting where everyone else is, I think. But the interesting question that they have is that they ask, do you think it's all right to do you think it's still all right to pursue a career in architecture?
Which is the one that worries me the most, right? It's like if you are in the middle of your Master of Architecture, which either you've already done like 4 years of architecture or you're just starting, and you're in the middle of it and you're questioning if yes or no you should, I guess, finish it and even bother trying it, then it makes me really question, like, what is your goal? Right? Like, how much really are you into architecture? You haven't even finished it yet. You haven't even tried getting out in the world, and already you're questioning your decision and your motivation. So I would be more worried about that than like the age of the work experience. It's really, what are you doing it for? And why do and why would you give it up before you try?
Yeah, the other thing too is like, architecture school, regardless of the school and regardless of the level, whether it be undergraduate, city college, or master's or anything, is so different from practice. And then one practice is so different from another. So what I would say to this person, unless you're really concerned with like figuring out what you want to do for the rest of your life now at the age of 28, just try it. Just try it and see. And again, I know this person's a female, I'm pretty sure. So maybe biology and having kids is kind of coming to play in their minds. But that aside for the moment, just reference back to everything we just said in the previous comments. Like, everyone's pursuing different careers at a later age, and 28 is still super young. And I feel like if maybe this person was 35, then maybe my opinion of it would be a little bit different, but even then, it's still 35. I feel like it's a new 25.
Again, to me, the age and the experience doesn't matter. To me, it's like, okay, why did you decide to do a Master of Architecture? Why did you decide architecture? Why do you want to be an architect? For what do you want to be doing after you graduate? Yeah,
I will say
that's the biggest question you have to answer. You know.
Yeah, I will say that. It's tough. Like, there are people who go through architecture school. and let's say the school we're talking about is middle of the road, so it's conceptual and it's also somewhat practical. It's it's not like on either end of the spectrum. It's somewhere in the middle, so it's well-rounded, we could call it. And you go through that process and you love it. There's a lot of people who go through architecture school and really love it, and they have a great time. In part because of the social
the booze,
but they have a great time doing that, and then they hate what it is in real life. So that's one concern, right? Is the difference between whatever your experience in school was versus what it's going to be in practice. So what happens is people who love architecture school when they graduate, you have two choices. Either you conform to the way it is, right, and you happen to find out that you actually love the wildness of school, and you also love the tameness, let's call it, of practice, generally speaking. Or you hate practice and you quit and you go do something else, which happens to, I feel like, 40% of architecture graduates. Or the third category is you stay in the practice, but it's not because you're happy with the way it is. It's because you're going to change it somehow. You have big ambitions to do something with the practice. Yep. So those are your three options after you graduate. And again, you just have to try it and see, but you have to be prepared that it's going to most likely be very different than what school was.
It's going to be different. Like you said, it's not because you're going to graduate and start working for an architecture office that you're stuck in an architecture office for life, right? Like you said, there is many people who, after working for a few years, find their own way and what they're actually really meant to be doing. You know, and going through the step of working for an office, help them figure it out.
And what's interesting, though, is that in all the scenarios of postgraduates working or leaving architecture, or staying in architecture, regardless of how you do it, it's all passion. It's all passion-driven, passion-based. You stay in it and you work at an office and you just do what they do, and you still love the work, or you try and reinvent the profession because you love it, or you leave it because it's not what you love to do. Very few people stay in architecture if they aren't passionate about it. And because for reasons. One, it takes a lot of fucking work, a lot of time commitment, and which means you're taking away time and energy from other things. It's just the way the universe.
Sacrifices.
And then also, there's not a lot of money to be made. So why would you stay in something that you don't like, you're not passionate about, that's taking a lot of time and energy away from other things that maybe you're interested in, and you're not getting any money? You only stay in it if you're interested, if you're passionate about it. So that's where it's really hard to know whether or not you're going to be passionate about something before you try it.
I know.
So I would go out and try it. And the thing is, like, maybe you land in one office and you hate it. Well, then go to a different place. And you're like, this place is like way too conceptual. They're just doing paper architecture. I want to do like houses. Well, go fucking work at a housing office. You go work there. I don't like this office. I think too small. I want to do bigger multifamily housing. Then go there. There's a lot of variety. So you can probably find, so if you liked architecture school, there's a good chance you can find a practice out there in the United States, that's going to satisfy your passions and your desire for that, for that buzz you get.
Or you can find an office that would give you the room to develop that,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if though you are, if like the passion and the interest, it doesn't seem, you don't think it's like the central part of why you want to do things, and you're more interested in like money or something, then this is not for you. Unless you're going to stay in architecture for the long game of having your own practice and doing some amazing work and getting good clients and all that stuff, you're not going to make a lot of money.
Or you become a partner in an office after you've been working there for 15 years.
Long time.
Right?
But even then, it's not, I would not call it a lot of money. It's like middle class, kind of upper middle class, maybe, Yeah. So that's the other big deciding factor for this person. That's the only thing I can think of that would allow one to kind of accurately make a decision of not pursuing architecture professionally before you even give it a try, is the money discussion. If you're that type of person that you just want to be making, hundreds of thousands of dollars right off the bat, and you want to end up making like millions of dollars a year, unless you're willing to go the long term and putting a lot of hours, not for you.
Well, but if that was your ultimate goal when you started that master or like getting into architecture, maybe you should have done a little bit of research, because that's like 0.5% of the architects on this planet. So, definitely not the right field for that.
Yeah, and if you have a master's in architecture, I don't know where this person went, but it's fucking expensive to do a master's in architecture. 1 year at Columbia, you have to borrow over $120,000 if you're going to borrow some money for, room and board and for food and things like this. So, if you have that kind of student debt afterwards, and you're concerned about pursuing architecture because of the financial thing, then it's a bit late. Then I don't really have an easy answer, because there's a lot of people who are successful architects or successful designers in that field, successful in practice. There are a lot of them who are successful in academia. They've become heads and chairs of departments and write all these papers, and very desirable people, and they have massive student loans still. So, that's, if a hesitancy is because you're worried about paying off student loans, there's not an easy answer for that in this career.
You're just gonna have to start working and start paying them. That's it.
Yeah. All right. So, that's almost an hour, actually, but maybe we can hit up one more question really quickly, since we're only to two.
Me.
The last one. Yeah, we'll just do one more. The last one is, we did an episode recently about passing the AREs, the Architect's Registration Examination. And someone asked about the CSE, which is the California Supplemental Exam. And they wrote, Californians are stuck in not being able to call themselves architects after passing the AREs until they pass the CSE. No? Yes, you are correct. If you're in California...
That's right. I never thought about that.
Yeah, you can't... That's
such bullshit.
You can't call yourself an architect unless you pass the CSE. But I think if you say, I'm an architect licensed in Texas and you're in California, I think that's okay. But you can't say I'm not entirely sure about this, actually, but...
I don't think you can do that.
Of course you can. I'm an architect and a license in Texas, right? You can say that. Yeah. Why wouldn't you be able to say that?
But you can't do work in, let's say, California and call yourself an architect if you're not licensed here.
You can't do those both things. Correct. Yes.
You
can tell people I'm a licensed architect in this other state. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's such bullshit. It's like, who cares? And it really sucks that, people in California cannot call themselves an architect, and they have to take that supplemental exam, because first it's more studying, it's more money, and you've done as much as other states that don't have it, and there people call themselves architects. So it's a little that whole licensing thing is such a scam to me.
Well, that's the other factor with all of these organizations, the AIA, NCARB, the CAB, and whatever education departments of various states. It's like money.
It's like it's one big country.
And I understand that for some of the organizations like the AIA, that the money goes towards them fighting much larger battles. For example, like the president wanting to enforce a restrictions or whatever on government buildings, architecture styles. I get that, but I don't know. I just don't think that's enough really for all the money that we have to pay. Anyway, the CSE, yeah, I took the CSE. The CSE is not written by, organized, run. It has nothing to do with NCARB or the people that administer the was it 6 exams now? The 6 AREs. It's an entirely different thing. It's put on by a different board, and it's when you go to take the test, it's still at a testing facility like the AREs. It's not hosted by Prometric. It's hosted by some other company in California that the California Architecture Board uses for their exams. It's very similar to one of the AREs, right? It's the similar kind of length. It's pretty long. It's like 3 hours, something around that time. The same process you go through. There's a scanner, and perhaps, and you have to check in and all this stuff. And the the language of the text and how confusing it is or how legible it is also very similar to the AREs. I found it just as perplexing. Actually, I'm thinking back now, I found it worse than the AREs.
It's maybe like the grand cousin of the people who wrote the ARE exam that wrote that one.
Yeah, it's the grand cousin after, maybe the parents fucked other parents and siblings fucked other siblings. And then there's the CSE. It's too graphic. I'm sorry. Game of Thrones. Here's the thing too. It's like everyone who's pissed off about, kind of like risque conversation. It's like, have you seen Game of Thrones? Like there's some like gnarly shit going on there. If I
looked at history, there's some gnarly shit in human history.
If I just read stuff that's happened in the past, like not even in history, but like in fiction or in Family Guy, like people would be so upset, but it's like, there's precedent for it. Anyway, so yeah, the CSE, I don't know. If you pass all the AREs, I feel like you can pass the CSE, quote unquote, without a problem. It's still going to be a pain in the butt to do. Still going to require a lot of studying. And when I took it, I came out of it just as perplexed, at the end of it. I'm like, man, I have no idea if I pass or failed this thing. No idea. Because it's it always comes down to two answers for me. I don't know what it is, A or C. I just choose one and move on. And so, yeah, it is as backwards as the 6 exams. But you do get your results like right afterwards, and they tell you whether or not you pass, which is kind of nice. And I forget the cost. I think it's like a couple $100 or something.
I think it's the same range.
Same thing. So, and the CSE. It's for a long time, everyone was always saying that the California Supplemental Exam they have to take to get reciprocity in California is about structures, because California has earthquakes. So you have to know about seismic and things. There's very little about that stuff on the exam. It's mainly to do with the different agencies and regulations that are specific to California, which there's a lot. And memorizing all those different groups of people and how they interact. And if a project's located here and there's this condition, what are different agencies involved? And then on the exam, they don't have quote unquote trick questions, but they have fake agencies. And, so it's very similar to the ARE. So that's what I have to say about the CS. I don't think there's much more to say about it, really.
I mean, I have to study for it. It's just a lot of memorization.
A lot of memorization.
Right. It's not even like knowledge, experience, or thinking. It's just purely memorization.
But you have to know the good thing about the CSE is that in some ways it's more focused than the AREs. Like we were talking about in the recording, like you take PPD, but really you probably should have studied for like everything. With the CSE, it's a much more focusing because it's a one exam. So you study everything you know for that one exam, and that's kind of it. Even then, there's a lot of weird questions that come up, but it is just a lot of memorization. So if you can memorize all the different agencies at the local, county, state, and federal level and all of their acronyms and whatever, and know it really well, so you know immediately who gets involved and how they interact or don't, then you'll do good on the test, I would say. So yeah, that's all I have to say with the CSE.
All right.
That's it for now, right? All right. So I think that's it for this recording, right?
You're looking at me like I'm holding on questions somewhere. Maybe I have some extra one in my pocket. Who knows?
All right. So we are back. So what happened was we did the recording. We answered some of the questions. And then we realized that we overlooked a couple messages, voicemails via the hotline. So we wanted to get to these, probably just the one actually for this week.
You mean you forgot one. That's what you mean.
All right. So let's play the voicemail and then we'll get into it.
Hello, this is Raisa. I am currently a master's student in Boston Architectural College. It's a IPAL-based program, and I just listened to your episode on the IPAL, and now I'm very conflicted because from what I've heard on the podcast, the episode is that it does not sound like I made the right choice by doing IPAL, because you mentioned that working in those 5 years of your education really deters you from being a good designer and a good architect, because that's when you're developing that creative mind. So I kind of just wanted some advice, because I currently am, the program at the BAC requires you to work full-time, or work part-time, because you're gaining the hours while you're in school. So I'm really struggling with that because I feel like I'm not, producing a lot of good work because I'm working full time, trying to gain those hours. So do you think that I should just go to another school, or and now I'm kind of confused after watching your episode, or listening to your episode. I feel very conflicted about being in the IPAL program. Thank you so much. Please give a call back.
All right. Did she say that she's a master's student, or that was a mistranslation at the beginning?
Oh, I didn't pay attention.
Let's see.
I'm currently a master's student.
No, bachelor student.
Bachelor.
Okay. We use Google Voice for this, and it gives me an automated translation.
It's not always accurate.
And it's not always accurate, so that makes a big difference that she's not a master's student. So, first of all, thank you, listener. I didn't quite catch their name.
I think it was Teresa.
Maybe. Right. Thank you, kind person, for calling in and leave a voicemail. A very honest voicemail. So there are many thoughts with this. The first that I think we both probably have is that, we do recordings about various tips and tactics, topics, and et cetera, because we want to help people. And knowing that we've caused extra confusion, maybe that's a good thing, but also... it's not. Yeah.
Our way of thinking isn't necessarily like the only way of thinking, and our opinion on things doesn't mean that you need to change your life decision based on what's in our episode.
But I also don't want this to sound like we're trying to, that this is a cop-out, that we're trying to take back or walk back any of the things we said. We fully stand by everything we said. The complexity, though, of a decision like this, like, do I stay in this program or do I potentially even transfer to a different school? There's so many different factors involved. Cost, location, personal stuff, significant others, family even.
Well, and she's already in it, so, it's not like, do I start it or...
Right.
It's more like, do I keep going the way I've been going so far? Yeah.
So there's a few things I would want to know. The first is, like, how far along this person is in their... it's a 5-year, so Bachelor of Architecture program. I thought BAC was a 4-year, but how far along you are in the 5-year program is one question. If you're like in 4th year, then just finish it out and then move on. If you are, well, what are we? We're like the beginning of a year, so in the middle of a school year. So let's say she's a 2nd year, right? Then perhaps the flexibility is a little bit greater in terms of whether or not she jumps ship or not.
Yeah, and then she mentioned that the program is based on doing IPAL.
Mm-hmm.
One of my questions would be, is it a mandatory thing, or can you opt out of the IPAL part of the program?
Yeah, and I don't know much about BAC. I do have a friend. I haven't spoken to him in like years at this point, but who went to BAC, if I'm not mistaken, and then he later on did a master's at SciArc and did really high conceptual stuff at SciArc. And for what he was doing, that kind of work, very high level, very successful, right? So very, very good work for that range of design. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but for what he was doing at SciArc, he did very, very well. So it's not to say that just because you have a 5-year degree and you went through and you at BAC or whatever other school, that means that your education stops there and you've totally missed an opportunity to open your creative mind to other opportunities. That said, this particular individual was very intelligent, very passionate. He was probably not the average designer. Like, he had a lot going for him. And also, he graduated from BAC before IPAL even existed. So he didn't have to do, she was saying, this caller was saying that she worked either full-time or part-time while being in school, which is like absolutely mental when I hear that. Like, the idea of working full-time, I don't know how that happens. The idea of working part-time is still really difficult, but like, the school that I went to, Cal Poly SLO, a lot of students worked part-time.
I did that in my last year.
Because of, not for IPAL or for licensing, but because they had to pay for tuition or for housing or for food or for beer, really. But so it doesn't mean that because you're working part-time that you are going to end up being a bad designer, or that your time in school, your designs are not going to be good. I mean, there are plenty of students who worked part-time and they did really, really good design work.
Yeah, I did. Okay. Yeah. But that's kind of what she mentioned, though, in the message, is that she feels like because of the fact that she's been working full-time, part-time, that she hasn't been able to spend maybe as much time as she wanted on her studio design projects because of that.
We don't want to see if she said full-time or part-time.
The program at the BAC requires you to work full-time, or work part-time.
Okay, so I think she made a mistake. I don't think she's working full-time. That doesn't make sense. You can't work full-time while
she said full-time after in the message, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think she meant part-time. But because full-time is usually 30 hours technically, or whatever, 4 hours a week. That's not possible if you're in school. Like, how do you go to class? So working part-time. But anyway, to your point, she says that, I feel like I'm not producing good work because I'm having to put so much effort into just getting these hours done. And, it's funny because I had listened to this recording before our recording. I listened to the voicemail before our recording, and I was trying to think, okay, what are the positives or what are the reasons that would, allow her to stay at the current school so that I can not just encourage people to uproot their lives potentially to go somewhere else, because that's a really radical thing to suggest over a podcast when we don't know the person, we don't know all the details, and I'm hesitant to make those kinds of statements. But the fact that she says in the voicemail that I feel like I'm struggling to produce good work because my attention is not there, the energy probably is also not there, like physical energy. I mean, if design is your big focus and that's the thing you want, that's the reason why you're interested in this degree and in architecture, then it's a legitimate thing to say, okay, what else can I do outside of BAC? If BAC allows you to not participate in IPAL, like we were saying, that's the easiest fix, assuming they have a good design program. I'm not familiar with the school. But if they say, okay, no, if you're going to be here, you have to be doing all these internships, you have to be going through IPAL, and you feel like you're not getting what you want out of it, then yeah, I would think about transferring. I would. And that's not just because that's my opinion or our opinion about what design school should be about, which clearly we have our opinions, but it's if this person, you feel like this is what you want to get out of school and it's not happening because the way it's structured, then yeah, I would consider leaving.
Well, yeah, and you're paying your tuition, right? So if you feel like you're not getting the money into what you would be interested in doing, then that's not good. But again, we don't know what year she's in. So that's... we don't know the intensity. I mean, maybe you work like full-time for like 3 months, in one semester or something, and the rest is like you have like studios, like normal students. Not quite sure what the details are, but I mean, you could still be a talented designer and do IPAL and have a bunch of like experience in offices, but if you feel like you're already lacking on your own personal projects at school, well, you're probably not having the chance to give your best in your design. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And if you feel like that's not a good thing, then it's definitely a legitimate question to ask yourself if you want to keep going or not.
Yeah, for sure. And again, that this is like when we talk about stuff on the podcast, like these issues, it's one based on our own experience. It's based on what I've seen in other people and other students. And we're not saying this is the only way to do things, but what we're saying is if I had to create a program and run a school, and I wanted the best chances for the best turnout of the students, this is what I would do. Now, the reason why I say that is because every person's very, very different. Like the individual I was speaking to, my friend or former friend, went to BAC, then went to SciArc, but he's a special individual, right? So you kind of have to think about yourself and how, like, do you feel like based on the things that we said in previous recordings, does that apply to you, or do you feel like you're in a little bit of a different situation because of your personality, because of your skill set, your talent, your work ethic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Right. And that's an entirely internal conversation and awareness, nothing to do with external factors.
And let's say you cannot, transfer to another school because you can't move out of the state you're in because, maybe you still have like a year or two to finish and you don't want to drop your friends and everything else. What are your options? Well, like you said, like doing a master after undergrad is another way to get into like more design specific experimentation. And oftentimes master are also more personal interest driven. So, if that's something that you want to develop, that might be a good option. It's more money because you got to stay in school for a little longer, but it might be worthwhile. You could also start working at an office that does like more design work, right?
Right, you can, but the issue is that to complete your AXP, you have to complete different types of tasks. And if you go
after you graduate from undergrad, right?
Okay.
Like maybe you're doing like, you're working with Bob and Susan, they're like mom and pop's office to get your hours for IPAL, fine. Then you graduate, or maybe you apply to like, bigger design office that are known for like very good design that you like. And then you could learn how to design things within an architecture office. Yeah. It would probably be less conceptual, but again, it depends on what type of firm you're applying to.
Yeah.
If it's like, I don't know, firms who focus on a lot of competition, or you could also do competition yourself to like kind of boost your ideas and your design.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think the first is that you kind of highlight an important point that architecture is a long game. It's a long profession. So their learning experience. I was just editing the episode for this week, or next week rather, and the guest was saying that, you will go through half a dozen or a dozen different lives in your career as an architect. And I think that's a really profound statement, and it's totally true. And it's probably applicable to many people outside of architecture, and I think more people should view life that way. So there's not a specific order that you have to do things in. Like things get inverse, you go up and down and forwards, backwards and sideways. But I still think that the things that we said on the 142 episode about when you're a certain age, it's the right chemical makeup of all the different factors of undergraduate school when you're came out of high school.
I totally agree, and I'm not changing my opinion. I'm just thinking like, okay, well, depending on situations, you can or cannot do certain things because of X and X factors.
Yeah.
So what are your options, right?
Yeah. The challenge is that if you let's say you stay at BAC and then you decide to try and boost your design education after graduating through competitions on your own, that could be good. Problem is that you're lacking the motivation that comes with the school environment. You don't have the environment of the studio and the people around you, even if you hate your classmates. You don't have the professors giving you feedback, even if you don't like their feedback. You don't have that support system. And, I've done projects obviously during school, and I've done projects after school, like when school was ended, to try and finish something on my own that I was really passionate about, or did a competition, a new project, or took an old project and made it into a competition. And I'm telling you, like when I was in school, I was like hardcore, too hardcore. But trying to do stuff on your own, man, it's a different beast. It's amazing how quickly you lose steam. Even for a person who's really dedicated and loves the work and all his interests and stuff, it's like someone just sucks the life out of you, and suddenly you're sitting on your own at home or whatever on your computer and you're sketching stuff. You're like, well, why the fuck am I doing this? I feel like I'm putting in a lot of energy to try and gain some kind of design knowledge, but I'm having to put in 100 units of energy for only 10 units of like knowledge back. In school, that relationship would have been much more reciprocal, like 100 for 100. And I feel like now that I'm out of school, either graduated or just a summer break, like I could be doing other things, and I'm going to get more out of those other things in life experience and in design. So That's one potential issue. The other is that, again, if you go work at an office and you try to learn about design there, you will definitely, if you're at a good office and all the other things are in place, you will definitely learn more about design than you do in school for certain things, right? But what you very likely will not get is the more conceptual, theoretical, the freedom that comes
you
with
don't
school.
get the freedom.
And that's because of all the factors. It's the fact that, the partners, they have clients, there's a schedule, there's a budget. These are real things that have to be dealt with. And, the more I talk about it, the more it seems like you went to an interim art school between high school and college, right?
Yeah.
And you always described it as being this very free experience to try these different things, and where you weren't confined to architecture or whatever architecture means to you or to the faculty members in the school, et cetera. Like you were just free to express. And to me, that's undergraduate architecture school is that within that profession. And the other thing is that I'm pretty sure once you've enrolled in I don't know, but I think once you've enrolled in IPAL and you put in hours for the AXP, right? Those don't go away just because you stop doing IPAL. I mean, this person you have to check and email.
You have to
NCARB
complete it within a certain amount of years, but
right. But I feel like if you do 30 hours of AXP and you're in IPAL and you quit IPAL and you go to another school, those 30 hours are still it's money in the bank, right?
I would hope.
They're not going to disappear because you didn't complete the IPAL program.
No, you might have to pay a fee to maintain it open because that's what NCARB does.
So that's something to look into. But so let's assume that the internship hours you've put in so far are yours, right, for the next 5 years, because I think there's a 5-year limit before it finishes, which is a long time. Well, then that makes the idea of transitioning to another school much easier to swallow, because you're not losing the thing. You already put in the hours that's there, right? It's just the all the other stuff uprooting and then potentially having to transfer in, hopefully at the same level of classes or what. Yeah,
I agree. Tough life,
The other thing is I would recommend is that after you look into these other schools, and this is kind of generic advice, I suppose, but you should definitely talk to as many people as possible about this. Hopefully there are some faculty members at BAC who you gel with and you trust, and you can speak very openly about this and say, I heard this wacky podcast. They have good points though, and I'm concerned because I don't feel like I'm getting enough out of my own design projects because I'm distracted because of the other things. And I would try to speak to a couple different faculty members, again, ones that you think are smart and have their heads on straight, and they will probably give you hopefully some pretty good answers. Because again, the thing is, teachers at schools, they are not dedicated. Their allegiance is not just to the school. Their allegiance is to design and architecture and the profession and education more than the university.
Well, that, and also if the IPAL if the students feel like the IPAL program is taking too much focus out of their design projects, and you're not the only one feeling that way, well, the school needs to know, because they put that in place and they also have the power to change it. So,
yeah. No, it's totally true.
And it's not like you're complaining to your boss about something you don't like and you're going to get fired, right? You're paying to be in school. So they want you to be happy. They want you to get what you're here for. And if you're not, then you should feel that it's okay to go talk to someone about it and let them know, because, there is flexibility. There's probably things that they can do to help you get what you want out of their program. They definitely don't want you to transfer to another school, right? So I would also probably start there,
Yeah, and I think when you go to speak to the faculty member, don't talk to the chair, the department head, unless you know them really well. Don't talk to anyone that's in the administration level, because it's their job to sell the school. The lack of allegiance I was talking to does not really apply to deans and heads of departments and directors in those levels. Actually, truthfully, it does, but you have to know them and get drinks with them after work. And it's a different conversation. If you're a student and you're approaching a faculty member, if you talk to any of these higher up people, you're going to get the sales pitch, because that's their job. And actually, Michael Rosica, who's been a guest on this show, who has an ARE boot camp and all this stuff. He says explicitly that IPAL was created, by NCARB, but it's for schools. Like schools wanted to basically sell this to convince parents that this is a better school because you're going to get quantifiably more out of it than if you go to another school. And for parents who know nothing about architecture, it's like, well, yeah, you go to this school, you get a license. That makes sense. Let's do that. So find a faculty member who you feel like is going to not have any problems speaking totally honest about things. And they might, and I'm telling, also the faculty, they didn't go through IPAL, and they might have done some internships during school. They might not have, but make them understand what it's like to be in your shoes, and make them understand, make them kind of role play in their minds, so they can see like, yeah, actually when I was in school, if I imagine having to go through all the steps you are, like I could see where that would be a detriment, right? And then ask them frankly, okay, well, if I were to go to a different school or try and fix this problem, what are my options? What do you think I should do? And they might come up with some solutions that you hadn't thought of yet, or we haven't thought of yet, or they can at the very least give you feedback on the idea of leaving or not leaving, or whatever. Or
talk to people who put the IPAL program in place at the school and be like, hey, you know what? The students are not happy with how things are going on.
But those people, again, they don't know design. They don't know. They're not in the trenches. They're not. The people who implement the IPAL program are not people who have gone through it, or have thought about it as much as we have, and they are not. They don't. Don't know what they're doing. No, you should tell them for feedback reasons, but don't expect to get any. What's up?
My battery's dead. Oh. No, they don't. But I mean, again, they're the ones who put it in place, so they have the power of changing things. And unless they know that there is an issue, things are not going to change.
Sure.
The other good thing you brought up was, talk to other people about that issue, because I don't know, maybe like your classmates who are going through are feeling the same way. And maybe people in other studios are feeling the same way. Or maybe teachers are feeling that students are not that involved in their project either, And you only make things change if they are brought up to the surface. So you gotta talk around you and
be a good citizen.
No, but I mean, it's not like there is solutions.
Yeah. And it's not an either or. It's not like you stay where you are currently and everything stays the same, or you completely abandon the school. It could be that they're willing to, even if officially the program of BAC is that you have to be enrolled in IPAL and you have to be meeting a certain number of internship hours in order to stay in this program. If you express your thoughts, and you also tell them that you love BAC and you want to stay, but you have these concerns and it's not working out, they might be able to bend some rules for you. There's a lot of gray area and kind of wiggle room and remainder space within any system. That's within an office, which maybe we've talked about in the past very well, and that certainly applies to an organization like a school. They will make exceptions if they feel like it's valid, and they can because they can do whatever they want, really.
Yeah, and it might be like, I don't know, maybe you move some of your work hours to when you're in break, and you do more time when you're in break. So when you're not in break, you can focus more on studio.
Yeah.
Or things like that. It might just be like, just make a deal with the school to make it work, right?
And the way I would approach that would be, again, to find that faculty member, tell them how you feel, figure out a plan that in this case, in this scenario, involves you staying at BAC, and have that faculty member, who is hopefully not the black sheep of all the staff, be the champion for you. He or she is the one that's going to help you get this forward. If you walk into the admin building on your own, you pitch this idea to whatever person, that's not going to work. You're just going to get, it's not going to work. So you find someone that's going to be your so to speak. I guess one option, which is not the greatest, is to do your internship hours, but then kind of like not put a lot of effort into it. But then it's kind of like that's probably not the best idea.
It's not, but I mean, maybe that's also something you could do, is talk to the firm at which you're doing your internship and be like, I wish I had more time to be involved on more design, aspect of projects. And even if you have to fill out your hours for like different categories, and why not? I mean, I don't know where you're at right now with it, you know, but that could be also a way to make sure that you don't get like pigeonholed in like on one project doing like, you know, stupid things just to fill up the hours. Maybe there is more that you can gain out of that internship. And, you know, again, if you voice that to the firm, they'll probably be more than happy to put you on stuff that's going to get you excited.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too, but it just goes back to the fact that the design education in school, and when I say in school, I don't mean actually the education that comes from having peers at your age level and teachers around you. That's part of it too. But I actually mean more primarily you at your desk, no distractions, so to speak, no concerns of the quote unquote real world, and working on your design skills and what design means to you, what architecture means, this kind of stuff at your desk by yourself. There's nothing that can replace that time. And which is why teachers are always saying being in studio and working in studio is important. Well, they say that actually because of the studio culture, but they also say it in part because you have to put in time at your desk. Like if there was another way to get that education and that juice and that way of thinking and absorb it and learn it through another means, then we would say, yeah, just do that if it worked in this scenario. But I just think being at your desk and struggling with design problems, there's nothing like it, you know. And at least for me, that was the sauce of school. You know, that was one of the most important things.
I've never done any of my project in school. I've always worked in my apartment. So.
Sure. So it's rather what I mean, but you know, just working at your desk, wherever your desk might be.
Having the you know, like the mind free to be thinking about all of the big questions you want to be thinking of without worrying about, you know, making it on time or like having to like go to the office tomorrow and like do things.
And sorry. Go ahead.
It's like, you know, it's like wine. Like you kind of need like times to like sit and mature and age and change color and, you know. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Absolutely. And you get a sense of that in practice, yes, a little bit. But not so much. You get a sense of it in school when you're doing stuff on your own or in a competition, perhaps. Like you get a sense of time. You get a sense of how, you know, basically you're learning about yourself in a way. Am I boring you? Okay. You get a much stronger sense of the boundaries of how much time you want to spend on different phases and the kind of design process and what that process even is when you're working on your own. When you get to an office, the sense of schedule and time you have is less internal and less philosophical, and it's more just keep on track for schedule.
Well, you don't have the luxury of time, right? In the office, like time is money. Somebody is paying for you to be at your desk thinking about things. Mm-hmm. So you can't just like, you know, be wondering like, what is the window supposed to be and what does it mean? Because you got to figure it out within the next 10 minutes.
Exactly.
You know, in school, you might have like 2 weeks to think about what that window is going to be and make like hundreds of models and iterations. So it is. And
I think it's important to have that space to kind of like give too much time and then dial it back. You need that kind of flexibility to see where the boundaries are. And the boundaries are something that you create on your own, right? Because you have so much freedom in school. I'm trying to think of other solutions where, I mean, the other thing too is that if you feel like even if you weren't doing IPAL, that you still wouldn't be getting the kind of design education you want out of BAC, then that's another issue that's wrapped into all of this kind of conversation that you have to think about. It's slightly different, of course, but it's another thing too, right? And it might be the element that pushes you over to decide, okay, I'm actually going to try and go to this other place. So maybe to sum up, if this were me, based on the information I have, and I look back to when I was a second or third year or whatever, I would, and I found another school that I could transfer to, where I didn't have to do IPAL, and I felt like their program in terms of design was just as good or stronger, hopefully, I would probably do that. Knowing who I am and my interests, I would do that. Because the headache and the time lost and the energy lost or whatever is lost in that transition, right? I think the payoff of being able to be in school, even if it's just for the remaining 3 years or so, where you're free to kind of do the things we're talking about, is totally worth it in the long run, because it won't happen again, unless perhaps you do a master's. But then everyone's older and things are different. It's a different vibe. It's a different system. But so like even so, on the one hand, the idea of transferring, partway through is kind of radical. But also not. A lot of people do it, and again, because this is we're thinking about the career in long term. That whatever hiccup, whatever blip in the timeline to jump from one school to another because you like it better, small. Like I had a roommate who left Cal Poly SLO and went to SciArc, and I never think he would keep in touch with him, but I can guarantee he was totally happy with the decision, and he left. After he did 2 years at Cal Poly and he left to go to SciArc. I can guarantee he didn't regret it one bit, because SciArc was totally his thing. It might seem like a big change, but also I think in thinking long term, it's not. And considering the jewel that school is, I think it'd probably be worth it if it were me.
Yeah, I mean, your roommate moved from like Central Coast to SoCal, right?
Right.
This person's in Boston. I don't know what other schools are in that state that she could go to, as she could afford going to. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If it was me, I think the first thing I would try is, first talk to the school and see if I can like solve it from there before making like a huge life decision change, right? If I was in second year, I probably would not hesitate like looking at relocating myself to a school that I think suits my interest better, even if that means like, moving away from the few friends I made over the last 2 years and like, getting settled in one spot. You still have 3 years left in your program, so it's still a decent amount of time. And if you're in second year, you could still like adjust to a new school probably pretty easily because you're a little more mature than if it was your first year. So I think, things would work. It might be like some extra costs of like moving and stuff like that, but
it'll be nothing.
It would be worth it.
Yeah.
If it was in my like fourth year, I would probably not try and move school for like 1 year left and try and find like smaller, fixer solutions, for like the rest of my time in school.
And if she's a third year student, so she only has 2 years left, I would try really hard to convince the school to allow you to just take a 2-year break from the whole IPAL thing, just to focus on your projects. That would probably be a good solution, or go to a different school. And in that case, you might have to come back in and repeat third year, which gets kind of then the variables increase because of costs and things like this.
And if you're like set on moving school, then really like do your homework. Talk to a bunch of people who graduated from the school, who are in the school, go to open houses. Like, it's a big decision to make. So you don't want to just change it because you're not happy with IPAL. You want to make sure that new school you pick is the right one.
Yeah, for sure. And then even though we don't know BAC that well, if you find another school or schools, just hit us up, and we can, if we know anything about it, we can let you know our thoughts about those schools. And let's be clear too that the change of schools in this case is not because of a preference of like something that's more subjective. So like, I don't like the design, how they teach design here. That's not the issue, right? That's if this person was saying, I don't like the way they teach design at my school, I'd say, okay, well, what do you know your second year or third year, right? Give us some time. But we're talking about a structural thing, right? This program requires me to spend X amount of hours outside of studio, outside of my studies, to do internships. That has nothing to do. That's not subjective in any way. That's quantifiably less time toward what I want to be spending time on. So it makes it easier that way in terms of deciding. Mm-hmm. Okay. So anyway, thank you again for the call. We appreciate it a lot. And I think we already did an outro. So we'll just, keep it going. And we'll talk to you guys again soon. Keep sending your questions. And thank you to the listeners who sent us these over various platforms. Again, we have the hotline 213-222-6950. Call it goes straight to voicemail, or send us a text on there. And if you have a question, it's generally good to kind of give us a little more as much
background.
information as possible.
Like your social security number, how tall you are.
Because a lot of that information makes a big difference in these kinds of discussions. And of course, if you're one of the 3 people who, 3 or 4 people that we talked about today, and there's additional information, then just reach out. But I have things to do. I got to get going. I got to get going.
You were telling me earlier, like I speak too fast. You're like, yeah, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, man.
Yeah.
So if you listen, okay.
What else is there to say?
Leave us a review. Always good. Always good.
Yeah, we haven't asked for that in a while.
And if you are not in the United States and you left us a review on iTunes, we cannot see it unless we like really look for it. So send us a screenshot and, we'll add it to our website, post it on our Instagram stories and such. And always good to know what you guys think of the show.
We are on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube,
Facebook, Twitter.
Reach out to us, yada, yada, yada. We have some good guests coming up. Anything
if you have any suggestions of guests in LA, San Francisco, reach out, let us know. Always good to know what you guys are interested in listening, and they don't have to be architects. There could be other types of creatives.
Ooh, losing energy, I feel like. Look, this is the new year. It's still the new year. I think there's some exciting things coming soon.
It's the end of February.
Is it?
Well into 2020.
I know, it's kind of nuts.
It's kind of weird.
It's not good.
It's summer tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we will talk to you again.